is this waiting room? Okay, Rachel's in. Rachel is in.
So, guys, everything good?
Yep, we're just waiting on Anika to connect. Welcome, welcome, family. Just waiting on our expert panelists to join us, and then we'll be going live. That's Vatra, did you have to okay, I see Anika. Promote to panelist. So Anika, did that work better for you to register? Was the I'm not live yet, but did that work better for you to register?
No, I just had to sign in as a host. So when I signed in through my Zoom account as a host, didn't let me in. But like when I was just trying to join as a participant, it wasn't letting me in.
Okay. Okay.
Let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Okay, so I am going to try to do the same thing on my computer because that's where I have the
presentation.
Yeah, the presentation.
Okay.
So let me look up real quick. Black Army. So different email address. Okay, we tried to make it 12 at the dot. We tried, but we're almost there. Let's see.
It's all in grace. You know, right on time.
Right. Okay.
I'm gonna ask the attendees a quick question. We got Adam and Julia. I just wanted to ask if you guys, how was your guys' experience kind of like logging in? Did you guys find it really easy, or did you guys have to register after we? Okay. Adam or Julia, can you answer that for me real quick?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Adam.
No, you go. My bad. You started.
It was easy for me because I had a Zoom account. So just from the email, I clicked on and typed in my name, and that was pretty easy.
Okay. How about you, Adam?
I found it fairly simple. Yeah, it all was pretty straightforward, I would say.
Okay. All right. So, Miss Anika, whenever you're ready, we're gonna let you take the floor. I'm gonna go live on Facebook and create the post and tag you in it, and then we good.
Okay, so before you go live on Facebook, I'm trying to share and it's not letting me share.
Share what?
The presentation. Because it'll be like a webinar, me sharing the PowerPoint while talking.
Okay, give me just 1 sec. This is Run Like Harriet?
Let's see here. You have to Run Like Harriet. So if you give the Run Like Harriet host.
Yep, here she goes.
Perfect. Okay, and let me just try to share desktop application. Let's see if that works.
Okay. And now, let me make sure that I'm live. Bet. Oh, bet. Since you're the host, can you make me a co-host?
Okay, I'm gonna try doing that. Let me get out of here. Go back to the Zoom. Where are you at? More. Make co-host. Do you want to make co-host? Yes.
Okay. Make me the host real quick so I could go live.
How can I do this? Let's see here. Make host. There you go.
Okay. Live on Facebook. Cool. And you're still sharing your screen.
Let me figure out how do I get back to the shared screen. Let's see. Share.
Cool. All right. I think we're ready. I'm going to quickly introduce our esteemed panelist and expert, Miss Anika Bowie. I'm going to greet you guys in the language sorry. We all in this together and we all learning and make
Right.
So just want to give grace to our esteemed panelist, Miss Anika Bowie. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come and share with us as an intergenerational collaboration some free game on how to run for public offices. I know that you have recently ran, and that experience is of very, very important value, and we don't want to have it lost in history. So we appreciate you taking that time to reach across the generations to instill the necessary tools for this real marathon of systemic change. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn my video off and let you do your thing, Queen.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you, everyone who, put the invisible labor behind making this happen, making the Black Army Brigade, happen. Just, like the visions, the dreams of like a revolution, the dreams of change, the dreams of just like making sure our humanity is honored. I respect that 100%. And I just appreciate, you inviting me to this platform. So for folks, yes, Bossman Kais introduced me. I just want to give a quick little correction. My last name is pronounced Bowie, but it's totally okay. We live in Minnesota. We all know David Bowie, so we usually say Bowie, but my name is Anika Bowie. And I just want to emphasize that just because I got to respect my grandpa. It's his last name from Mississippi, and like he will be rolling over in his grave if he allowed me to have someone call me Bowie. So
Apologies.
No worries. Trust me, I hear it all the time. I don't take offense. It's just my way of just like reminded by my grandfather that it's Bowie, not Bowie. So y'all, welcome. This is so I created a quick little platform to just kind of get our minds in the space of why it's important to run for office, right? More in this virtual webinar is really more rooted in the content of the why. And I, created this platform and named it Run Like Harriet, because I really, really value and love the history and like the tenacity that we know the Honorable Harriet Tubman had, where she was running, fighting for her freedom. And we also want to recognize that Harriet Tubman wasn't the only one. During the institution of slavery in its early states in this country, she was not the only one who, looked around and noticed that things needed to be different. She wasn't the only one, but she was very significant in how she did it, and was very well organized, orchestrating abolition movement, to where people just, didn't wait for government to change its laws. They didn't wait for the private ownership of their slave master to change their laws. They didn't wait for this country to get out of this greed of economic greed to change its laws. She decided to just do it on her own. So in honor of Harriet Tubman, I named this platform Run Like Harriet, because when I ran for office, Harriet Tubman was my guiding principle in terms of why to keep going. So we're just gonna go a little bit into who am I. So I am a native of St. Paul, Minnesota, born and raised. I am also family. I'm a daughter, I'm a niece, I'm an aunt, I'm a sister, I'm a homegirl, I'm a friend. I'm a graduate from St. Paul Public Schools, and also from Central High School, and also Hamlin University, a private school within St. Paul, where I majored in criminal justice and social justice. And I'm also a community educator. So I found my love for education as a student, and then when I was in college and put in position to actually teach and educate our communities, I fell in love with it. I am a Freedom School servant leader intern, where I raised up generations and generations of scholars, Freedom School scholars. And I'm also a former candidate. So I ran for St. Paul City Council in Ward 1. That's the Rondo, Frogtown, North and Summit University, Hamlin, Lexington, near the Capitol area. So very diverse. It's called the heart of the city because it's literally the most, it's in the center of St. Paul, and the most diverse racially, economically, socially, and even politically. I'm a former regional organizing director for Senator Elizabeth Warren, who ran for president in 2020. I know it kind of feels like light years ago that there was a Democratic debate, but I had the honor to be her regional director in the state of Minnesota, where we, did our best to turn out votes. We did our best to not only utilize the platform to get people to just show up to the polls, but host roundtables and have really critical discussions around criminal justice reform, Asian American, Pacific Islander community issues, and how certain folks are not even recognized within the political national discussion. So I'm still the current vice president for the Minneapolis NAACP. It stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is the longest civil rights organization in this country. It has, the power of lawsuits. It has the power of advocacy. It has the power of change within, law to get us justice, right? I'm also the lead consultant in transforming government systems. I've been a lead consultant for many people, different consulting agencies, where I've contracted with many different people in government on community engagement. But most importantly, it's all rooted in transforming how government systems are interacting with community members. And then all of these great things, being an advocate for ending mass incarceration, a prison abolitionist, voting rights, really strong on that, and One of my favorites that like, you know, I hold near and dear to how I, you know, identify is I'm a creative, you know, I'm a creative. And this isn't on the slide, but, you know, we need to say this more often. I'm a Black woman, you know, and so what you're going to get today is through a lens of a Black woman in the intersectionality of being Black and being woman and being a Black woman. So perfect. That's who I am. And then this is kind of going to shape the lens of how I go further into it. So when we have webinars or any type of, you know, education, it's really important that like we know to have success with anything is to basically be a problem solver, right? To solve problems. Some of the most successful people in the world are just simply problem solvers. So I think it's really important that we name what is a problem we're trying to solve. And for me, with this webinar and with the Run Like Harriet platform, the problem I'm trying to solve is freeing our communities from political bondage by learning how to turn our pain into power to ignite political change. So this is going to be the framework of this webinar, where how do you turn your pain into power, and how do you ignite that? How does your power ignite into political change? So your pain is greater than your power. And it's just as simple as that. To know that your pain is greater than your power, and that within your power, you have unlimited, you know, ness through your power, right? And that pain is stagnant, and pain is for that moment, and pain is also, it could be very repetitive, but transforming it into some form of power is going to make change, and is going to be unlimited of the impact that you have. So like I said, this is like an educational platform. So we're just gonna go into the definitions of like, what is pain? And, you know, if you just look up what is pain, the most basic, you know, this is like by definition, not by interpretation. But pain is physical suffering or discomfort caused by illness or injury, mental suffering or distress, an annoying or tedious person or thing. So you can be a pain. And also it's careful effort, great care, or trouble. And then the verb, you have to cause mental or physical pain to. So to cause pain. So with pain, every single human being, you know, if you have flesh, blood, a nervous system where you can feel, if you have, you know, a nervous system where you can think, you know, conscious thoughts or critical thoughts, we all have been impacted by pain. And for me, I think, you know, storytelling is really important because we know we're in an age now where we've been able to talk about pain, where which I think is very revolutionary, especially being people, you know, descendants of slaves, or even people who've been extremely oppressed and like just, you know, treated in such an inhumane way. Often you're not able to even recognize your pain because you're treated as inhuman. And so I think, like, as we talk about, you know, recognize our humanity, we need to also recognize that we feel, you know, and like some of the things that we go through feels very painful, in naming that. So this is going to be just a testimony. I have on there a prayer from a prison cell, right? A prayer from a prison cell is a poem that I wrote years and years and years ago, when a very, like, you know, pivotal time, painful pivotal time in my life, where you know, I lost my dad to the mass incarceration system, to our penal system, our prison system. I was about 16 years old, just completed freshman year in high school. That was the very critical times where, you know, you need that type of guidance, you know, father figure, like just a figure, someone that you trust and lead in. So my personal testimony of pain is, you know, born into a community that was heavily impacted by mass incarceration. You know, I experienced homelessness as a child. My family experienced economic turmoil where they once were like business owners, small business owners in the community. And then through, you know, so many life changes, like had to sell their business and go through like extreme economic turmoil. At the same time, we had foreclosures going on and a huge depression under George Bush, the Jr. You know, my pain, naming it also, is connected to institutional racism. We know here in Minnesota, we have a lot of racial disparities, and that is responsible to institutional racism, to where someone designed institutions that were not in mind for our lives. I'm a survivor of abuse. I'm a survivor of also sexual abuse. I am someone who have experienced family separation, you know, as a child, due to our child welfare system. And I am someone who have overcame systems of miseducation, right? And this miseducation isn't only rooted in public schools, because we know that, you know, many of our curriculums and the teaching styles usually is not conducive to us to fully learn. But this is miseducation even in our community. And I'm someone who had, you know, entered into the juvenile justice system and later the criminal justice system, and had to overcome that. The picture that you see right here is a picture actually of me on graduation day in 2010. I'm class of 2010, whoop, whoop. On graduation day, on the phone with my dad, right? And at that time, my dad was incarcerated in a Minnesota federal prison. Actually, he was incarcerated in federal prison that was based in Minnesota. So this picture is really dear to me. It's in front of my house, and you know, I'm going to graduation and I'm on the phone, and my dad is telling me that he's very proud of me, right? And so for those who are familiar with Dr. Joy, who's a radical self-care healer, she talks about, you know, pain and joy runs through the same faucet. And even in this picture, the pain of not having my dad there in such an important time in my life, but also the joy, right, of him calling and me hearing his voice and hearing how proud he is. So now we're going to move on to what is power. So power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality. The capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events, political or social authority or control, especially that exercised by government, a right or authority that is given or delegated to a person or body, the military strength of a state or country, especially one viewed in terms of its international influence in military strength. So this just by definition, as you can see, there's many definitions of power, whether it's politics, law, military, religion, physics, sports, electrical, so many social, there's so many different powers. I like to look at power as more of like capital. And we know with capital, there's cultural capital, political capital, there's personal capital, there's financial capital, all different things that you have like a power bank of, right? But yet, you know, even in the framework of power, you can see right here within the definition, it's usually aligned to some type of government entity, systematic control, right? Power is control. So gonna go to my own personal testimony of me unlocking my power. And so like rooted in my pain, right? Rooted in my pain, growing up and having to experience losing a loved one to the prison system led me to actually recognize that pain, but led me to find ways of making changes. You know, it started very personal and then branched out to being very political, right? So my personal testimony of unlocking my power was really rooted in knowledge. Knowledge is very key, right? Knowledge is so key because there was something that someone had control of altering my life. And the person or the entity that had that control of like making decisions that impact my life were rooted in like a decision maker, right? There's so many different decision makers. And I just want us to recognize that power is also like decision making. And I decided that I'm going to influence decision makers. And one of the things that I'm going to do that's the core of my pain is make sure that my dad can come home and like my dad is granted his rights and my dad is able to live and function in this society as a human being and as a citizen and someone who should have, you know, the pursuit to happiness, liberty, you know, and justice, right? So part of that journey was when he was incarcerated, you know, going to Hamlin University, learning everything that I needed to know about what the criminal justice system was and the reason why it was created, right? And then how it was created. So all that led to me utilizing my personal power to figure out how to get him early release. Early release was, you know, I like wrote the judge. I figured out who was decision makers of helping him get home in time, wrote a letter to the judge, and he was able to get early release. So these are receipts that you see on the right hand side. Once he was home on early release, he was also on parole for numerous of years. Like it was ridiculous how, it's one thing with prison system, but also with our parole and probation, that is also a form of incarceration that many of our people find themselves in. So was able to write a letter to his parole officer who brought the letter to his judge to grant him early termination. So I utilized the power of the pen, right? So this was the power of the pen of writing a letter and like articulating why he should get early termination from parole, right? Through that time, you know, I was very involved in canvassing, voter outreach, worked on a couple of people's campaigns, and like really recognized that, you know, the power of the vote, because the power of the vote has influence of the power of who represents you and the power of who creates these laws that are impacted by you. So with my dad getting early termination of parole, he didn't get the power to be granted his voting rights. And I had put in here at nearly the age of 60 years old. So I just want to keep in mind that when we talk about voter suppression, you know, our early experience of voter suppression, usually we find ourselves in debating about voter ID, automatic voter registration, fighting for those things. But I think it's an accumulation of so many things that we're not aware of that removes someone's right to vote and like just even like right to even be engaged, right? So with my dad getting an early termination on his parole, he at nearly the age of 60 years old was able to vote for his very first time. I just want us to put, and this is in close to 20, I believe 2018. being able to cast his first ballot, nearly the age of 60 years old, which essentially, you know, inspired so many different people, you know, to get their voting rights restored through the way of getting off probation or parole, and was able to vote in our first Black mayor in St. Paul. So that was influence, and that was influence of getting to the polls and, like, you know, sharing why it's so important to vote. And then essentially that unlocked the power for me to be confident enough and bold enough and courageous enough to run for office. And so this is a quote from a U.S. Representative Congresswoman Ayanna Presley, who represents the people of Boston. Her quote, "The people closest to the pain should be closest to the power, in that a diversity of voices in the political process is essential to making policies that benefit more Americans." So it's really important. The people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. I showed that to you in terms of how my pain put me in position to ignite, or put me in position to understand my power to make change, to be involved in the political process that can benefit everyone. So before we get to that, I want just for people to either put in the chat, or if you're watching on Facebook Live, you know, I want you to create a two-part chart, right? A two-sided chart. On one side, I want you to put pain, and on the other side, I want you to put politics. And I want you to create a list of all the things that, just don't think too hard about it. Just write. Just put a list of like all the things that all the pain that you have experienced. You know, what are certain pain points, times in your life where you like recognize it was a pain point in your life, and then you didn't have any understanding of why this was happening, right? And then on the other side, put times where you you know, have the most power, times where you feel the most powerful, times when you made decisions, right? Times when you utilize and recognize your power. So I'm just going to give some time for people to do that. So while people are writing down their list of their pain, and also their personal pain and their personal power, I'm going to move forward to our third part of why politics, right? This is really important because you know, everyone experiences pain, everyone recognizes power. But it's really important that folks also recognize politics and what it is and how to utilize it. So politics is the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. The activities of governments concerning the political relations between countries, the academic study of government in the state, activities within an organization that are aimed at improving someone's status or position and are typically considered to be devious or divisive, a particular set of political beliefs or principles, the assumptions or principles relating to or inherent in a sphere, theory, or thing, especially when concerned with power and status in a society. Play politics, it says act for political or personal gain rather than principle. So why politics, right? Why politics? Why should people get involved in politics? Why does politics matter? Why are people not involved in politics? Why are people not even, informed of politics? And who's in politics and why certain people are not in there? My simple answer to why politics is because everything is politics. From your schools, from your streets, from your potholes, from your house, from your job, from your, I said school, but like also your education, from your economics is very political. Even like, we have in this country, even though we have in this country a separation of church and state, but very, very so people understand that religion is really political. Your family, your family makeup is political. Your friends, who you find yourself in, where you live, your zip code is very political. The food that you eat, the food that you have access to, all is a accumulation, a series of decisions that were made, right? You don't have to be a politician to be political. Everything is political. And until you know that, until you recognize that, there will be a lot of political games ran on you and you're not even aware. So it's to have more power, right, and control, is to understand that knowledge and understand the tools that you have to influence politics. My favorite quote by the Ella Baker, freedom fighter, Black children's crusader, civil rights activist. She was an NAACP member, just like phenomenal woman, right? In so many ways. I haven't even scratched the surface of knowing the fullness of Ella Baker, but her quote I love and hold dear to my chest is, be the light and the people will follow. So be the light and the people will follow. And the light can mean so many different things. The light could be knowledge, the light could be influence, the light could be leadership, and the people will follow. In running for office, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of all the things to think about and to prepare yourself to run for office. And I just want to also say that, this is just like a very, very small slither of information that, like, this is the iceberg of the tip of the information that we can continue to have more conversations on, continue to have these sessions, continue to share more information. But I just want to just even press right here in this picture that running for office is threatening power. Simply as that, running for office is threatening power. And with that, it creates political change. And the great Frederick Douglass, abolitionist, freedom fighter, says power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. And best believe running for office is both words and blows all the way. So I just want to take before we go into, before you run for office, before the announcement, really, all the things that you should consider, I'm going to just look into the chat box. And I'm not on the Facebook, so Bossman Kais, if you want to cue if there's any questions, but I'm just going to allow for folks to take a pause and if they have any questions, I'll take about 2 or 3 questions, and then I'm going to go into all the things to consider before you make your announcement.
So first, I want to
chatbot,
sorry.
and I'm not on the face. Oh yeah, go ahead. I hear you. Hello? Oh yeah, go ahead. I hear you. Oh, I think Kais was gonna say something.
Yeah, I heard some. I'm on live as well and monitoring the live. But I wanted to offer those who are in attendance to first.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I hear you. Oh, I think Kais was gonna say something.
Yeah, I heard some. I'm on live as well and monitoring the live. But I wanted to offer those who are in attendance to first. Oh yeah, go ahead. I hear you. Okay.
You may have to mute someone's mic.
Okay. Everybody hears me clear now, right?
Yep.
All right. So I wanted to first allow those who are in attendance, if you do have a question, I'm gonna allow you to unmute yourself at this moment just to ask that question. And if not, then we'll go to Facebook. And if not, then I got a couple questions that I could start this off with.
Well, if you want to, we can move on. I can just go forward, and then like there's a Q&A at the end. We can take questions there too.
All right, then let's do that.
Okay, dope. Yeah, I just want to give folks some time to queue in. So okay, earlier for those who was tuning in, I'm going through series of how to turn your pain into power to make political change. I shared my why, right? Because I believe that it's not your how will be defined by your why. And earlier I shared, the series of like naming my pain and also recognizing how I had utilized that to utilize power, utilize my own personal power, and it had ignited into me using my political power by running for office. So for those who are interested in running for office or consider running for office, are considering helping someone running for office to utilize their own political power, these are all the things that you should ask yourself before you make the announcement, right? I just say before the announcement or before you make the commitment, just because it's really important that when you are stepping into this realm, you have all the things like considered, to be prepared for essentially your freedom run, your freedom run, like you're running for I hope freedom for your communities and the people that you wish to serve. So first and foremost, you should ask yourself, what is my spiritual guide, right? What is my spiritual guide is speaking to what is guiding your principles and what is guiding you not only spiritually, but your conscious, your moral values, just all the things that are going to be very important as you are going to be on a trajectory of making 1 million decisions a million seconds. So it's really important that you have a spiritual guide, some sort of recognizing, knowing where your faith is rooted in, knowing that when it's just you by yourself, and you have to meditate or pray or do a check-in, reflect, that you have that type of principle, you have that type of ritual already in terms of how you are guiding yourself spiritually. This is really important, always bringing it back to the ancestor Harriet Tubman. you know, her spiritual guide was her like creator, you know, she, you know, her God, you know, she prayed to, and like she utilized prayer, and was very, a very like God leading person, God fearing person, God loving person. So second thing is, what is my why? You should be asking yourself, what is my why? What is my purpose? You know, I made up in my mind, I want to run for office. And like, now you have to ask yourself, you know, before you tell other people your why. Your why, you know, comes from a place that is a very human place, right? In terms of if you're running a race that's like a run like Harriet type of race, where you really are trying to you know, get folks out of bondage of whatever, you know, institutionalized racism or whatever ism there is, you have to have a why to that. And you know, that why is going to be your anchor that you go back to whenever you feel caught off guard, whenever you feel helpless, whatever you feel hopeless, whenever you feel like you don't know what you're doing, you're totally in the dark. You have to know your why so you can keep going back to it. And ask yourself, third, have I made a difference? Have I already made a difference, you know, prior to running? Because you don't want to get caught up with running for office as the only way you have made a difference in the community. Because then you can be categorized as an opportunist, categorized as, you know, where your principles and your values is not really rooted in running for office. You're just running for the show, right? So you want to make sure you have substance, and substance comes from looking back at your track record and all the things that you have done and all the things that you either have accomplished or all the things you thrive towards. You know, even if you weren't fully successful, you made ways to make a difference in the world. Make a difference in the world, make a difference in your family, make a difference in your community, make a difference even in yourself. You know, Muhammad Ali, from Malcolm X to so many people, Assata Shakur, Angela Davis, Martin Luther King, so many people that we recognize, they had a past before they had the legacy we know, but they made a difference. Fourth, what is policy my love language? This is really key, because when it comes to politics, it has its own language, just like many of the lawyers will tell you that the legal system have its own language. In law, the language is Latin, right? A dead language that doesn't exist, only under the rule of law, right? Policy has its own way of its own language, right? We know in religion it has its own language, and like in rap and hip hop it has its own language. So many in different cultures, every cultures have its own language and dialogue, and you need to make sure that is policy truly your love language, right? Do you really love digging deep into laws and our constitutions, our bylaws, our statutes, and really like digging deep into like seeing how like systems and government is created and departments are created? You have to really ask yourself those questions, because if you don't love it, you're going to be going into something that you're going to clearly hate, and you don't want to get caught up in the smokes and mirrors of like the prettiness of running and having your name out there or your face out there, and like you don't really love and value the language that comes behind, you know, political change. So number 5, what is your North Star? What is your North Star? And I'll even add on here, what is your promised land, right? When you are like people run because people don't run because people run because they're not satisfied with how things are, right? People run to get folks into a vision or within the platform that they are bringing forth. So what is your North Star is really important, because when you are making an announcement that you're running for office and you're wanting to get people involved, you want to make sure it's very clear what you are trying to get people to go to. What are you trying to get people to run to? Why are people running to the polls for you? Why should people come out to door knock for you? Why, right? And it's not, and of course you have your own power that you can connect with people and people love you, but what's most important to ensure political change, they have to be so in love with this promised land that you have envisioned, right? They're the North Star. They have to have some type of guiding principle into getting to this promised land that you are presenting to them. Next thing is, are you brave enough to get the bag? I say this this is like very unorthodox and non-traditional way of basically saying, are you ready to fundraise? Because the truth of all of this, when it comes to running for office and campaigning, you need money. You need money. Like your house doesn't run off of like smiles or good talk. Your bills is not paid off of just, off of like just fumes or your own, like, your own philosophies. You need to have a way to generate some form of income to finance and back and support your campaign, your vision, and help people get to the promised land with your political change. So that takes a lot of bravery. That's a whole other session right there. With our communities, when it comes to money, we have a lot of fear around money. We actually haven't even really been fully educated on money, on economics. We have been manipulated and all that. So be brave enough to get the bag. And is your squad down to run with you? Do you have a team, a network, a support community, who in your circle can connect you to other people to be part of your squad to help you run? You can't do it all by yourself. You have to be in a place of being open to help, right? Bringing it back to, Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad was not a one-person show. It took Moscow people to be helpful for your freedom run. And I see here in the chat that Bossman, you have some questions. Do you want me to go through to get to the questions, or you want to take the question now?
Nope, you mark when you're ready to take questions, and then.
Okay, and I'm just about ready. I'm just about through with this. So the next part with running for office, are you pressed for press? And I just put, the Cardi B, press. One of the things when, to get exposure and get your name out there is utilizing press. I advise that you utilize all free press. Press is really important. Being in the news, in the media, getting your face out there. So like, people know that you're running, people know who you are, they know what you're about. That's really essential, because if is it the movement if there isn't any talk about it, right? Is news really happening? Are you part of the news? So press. You need to be pressed for press. Just leave that right there. Next point, do you know a conductor who's going to lead you to the North Star? Essentially, this is getting to the point of like, you need to identify who your campaign manager is. And from my own experience running for office, this was, very essential. who my campaign manager and my relationship with my campaign manager really was like the core foundation of like how strong the campaign was. And like, because this is essentially the person you're giving, you know, all the trust to help guide you, right? And lead your team, right? And also like be the conductor of like the full pathway to victory, to the finish line, to the elections. This person is going to often be in the dark of so many things, or kind of be behind the scenes while you are kind of the shining light. So it's so important that you have someone who, Melvin Carter Jr., the father of the mayor, Melvin Carter, you know, I think about his advice saying, your campaign manager needs to be like basically a general, you know, like it's war. Like when you're running for office, you're threatening power. I think that's really important. You're threatening power. And whenever you're threatening power, you are like signing up for war. So your conductor needs to be someone who like is able to navigate in that space and that you trust. So that is just kind of, you know, overarching some questions around running for office, blended with like my own experience and like some gems I can offer. I'm getting ready to close out in a little bit, but I'm asking everyone if they can like the Facebook page, Run Like Harriet. Like I said, it's a platform, electoral education platform for Black millennials who are running for office and like turning their pain into power for political change. So if you could like the Facebook page, that would be really dope. And also you can sign up to be helpful with volunteering, to donate to campaigns that's focused on political change, learn more about the platform. You can also intern. We're going to get some internships opportunities coming up. And here's the link right here, bit.ly/Run Like Harriet sign up. Super dope if folks can do that. And then also one last plug. There's tons of organizations who are in this space, like Black Civic Network. I want to shout them out. I was one of the first canvassers or community stewards. Very great way to get involved and like activate our voting base here in Minnesota. Black Women Rising is another amazing organization where we were able to influence over 20 Black women in the state of Minnesota to run for office, right? So that's happening right now, real time. And like what I'm trying to do is what I do best is like, I'm trying to make sure we have a machine to get us to our, the engine that drives, you know, to ignite us to this political change. So I'm gonna take questions right now. If you want to type them or if you want to say them or put it in the Facebook comment, now is the time for that.
Okay. So our first question comes from Eliza, and it's about how do you develop a platform to run on? How many issues would you say are kind of best to, you know, identify before you decide to make that announcement?
So, okay, so like how do you create like a platform to run on? So I think, like I said, it's really important to be very clear and have like utilize universal language that people can relate to and also kind of like buy into, right? So like your platform definitely shouldn't be a long list of things. Just, you know, that wouldn't be responsible to like the greater public who, you know, want to get involved. We don't want to bombard them. Should have about like 3 to 4 platform issues And also what's really important with your platform should be like highlighting solutions, right? So we know that there's like issues in the area that you're running in, and like your platform is basically presenting like solutions to those issues and also values. So your platform is like a value system that would encourage people and give people like the way, like what is the clear pathway of solving some of our society's issues. Your platform should answer that question.
Nice. And now we got a question from Roger at Juxta. He says, how would you disincentivize organizations who serve Black people but are white-led and little to zero Black people on staff or on the boards?
So how are you saying, how do you incentivize like a white-led board or institution, but it serves Black people?
Yeah, I believe so.
Right. Well, we know in Minnesota there's a lot of that. It's tough because when you're like navigating a part of anything that is majority like white led, but it's in the lens of like serving Black communities, we're now at a point where we have to ask the very critical question of these majority white led institutions. How are they undoing are like fighting, working to end their anti-Blackness racism? Because we have gotten to a place where it's just we've given so much grace in terms of, because they are serving the Black community, they essentially can't be racist because they're helping Black people, right? It's always given through like the help. So I think we just need to ask better questions, and when we have organizations who are, claiming to be allies or claiming to serve, that we ask the very tough questions, with love, of like, what is the actual work you're doing to undo racism? Because everybody is racist, right? The only people who are not racist are working every single day within their own lives or within their institutions to undo that racism. So I think it's really critical we ask and have those conversations.
Okay, we got another question from Deanna, who I'm gonna mix these two up. So is it possible to run on a Black agenda platform in Minnesota and actually win? And if so, can you provide some examples of such? And then also building up on that, how would you keep outside developers from coming into the Black community and taking the lion's share of the opportunities and money?
Right. So the first question, I love the question, because that is why like we're doing this. That's why like I'm creating this, platform to like offer this education, because running for office, you're often told that it's impossible to even have a Black agenda. And not only is it impossible to have a Black agenda, it's impossible to run on one and win. I'm someone that believes that there's a possibility even within the impossible. This is created for us to create those spaces, because we all know it really doesn't exist, right? In the presidential election that we were like in the debates and stuff, there was tons of conversations we saw on a national level around like, how are you going to win the Black vote? We know Black people, was able to get Obama elected. Black people was able to like really like turn the tides on like the political conversation. So so essentially a Black agenda isn't so much important about like the win, and running for office isn't so much important about the win. What's important is making sure that when you do run for office, as a Black person is running for office, or someone who has a Black agenda is running for office, they are transforming that electoral process, and they are changing the conversations that's being had on policy issues while running. We, like, when you are threatening like the power structures, they have to shift and they have to change to stay in the game. So I just want to mention that that question is rooted more into like us creating that possibility to be true. And then the second thing around developers, how do you prevent developers from coming into, I guess you said, within Black communities and buying up things? Basically sounds like how do you prevent gentrification from happening? That's a really loaded question, but we know the things that go into the things that allow gentrification to happen is lack of home ownership, lack of like just property ownership, lack of just really not being able to put our dollars together and like have a collective ownership of our communities. Businesses are really important because like the businesses that are in those communities also cater to the revenue. And again, back to my earlier point, decision makers, we know like city council and just city like government, municipal government actually have like the utmost power around like zoning, where a building is allowed to be, how a building is, how a developer comes in, what type of developers come in, what is the process for the community being engaged with new development that's happening. Our tax dollars essentially go into this development. We have what's called tax increments funds, where we have funds that go into giving these developers tax breaks to build in our communities. So we need to put the incentive and have a lens that puts the incentive on the people who live in those communities should be like granted those resources to build within their communities.
Okay. I see that ULTCYP Vice President Rachel had a question. I'm not sure if you want to unmute yourself and ask, or if you would like me to just ask.
You go ahead and ask. I'll go ahead and ask. Just being a transplant to Minnesota, when the pain isn't necessarily personal or directly related, but one can relate to it in some way or form, whether it's been a family member or whether it's happened in the past or back home in my own community. How do you then take that person's community story and use it to create that power?
Right. So, I think about like Michelle Alexander, who is the author of The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. And, I think about her story and like what she was able to do, not only to like, write a book and create this book and do the research that goes into, the information around our mass incarceration system, which is like one area of focus someone can, create change in, right? But when she goes around and speaks, she isn't telling a story of her, of like how she's been incarcerated, or she's not even really telling a story of just like, someone in her own backyard. She's telling stories. She's a lawyer, she was a civil rights attorney. And even as a civil rights attorney and recognizing the issues, she tells the stories of her clients, and she tells the stories of so many people who, were branded with the label from our judicial system a felon, right? And how all of the things that they had to go through. So she tells the story of even her own ignorance of the fullness of the situation, of the system. So there's a lot of power in telling your story that this relationship to someone else's story. I think everyone, everyone like has some story that they can utilize to influence other people to get more involved. So I hope that answered the question that, no, you don't have to have a very personalized experience. Although I think, within the lived experience, it produces a lot of power, for you to be a subject matter expert on it. But someone who doesn't have that experience and like hears that story from someone else and is able to utilize their platform, right? And that's what, Michelle Alexander did by creating the new Jim Crow book and like sharing this information and igniting a movement for people to get involved in ending mass incarceration.
All right. Thank you for that. And this is the last question, then we'll wrap up. So Roger asks in a follow-up, how would you change CPED, CPED, and keep them accountable and transparent?
Can you give the acronym for folks of CPEG?
I don't know personally.
Who asked this question?
Roger Cummins of Juxa. I'm gonna quickly look it up. That's the power of the internet. Community planning and economic development.
Okay. Yep. And then what was the question?
How would you keep them accountable and transparent? Like, how can you use your political campaign or office space to invoke the change,
right,
and make sure that those who are doing community development group block grants are accountable to that community, that they're allowing other outside
right
to come in and develop?
So that question more targeted to what I like to call like the 3 Ps, like policy, process, and procedures, or actually, no, excuse me, process, procedures, and practices, which are really key in like, you running for office, you won't have, you can like vocalize the need for that, but when you're running for office, you're campaigning. You're trying to get into the position to utilize procedures, practices, and processes. But to your question around like accountability is really important, because accountability is only like exists within the process of how you go about doing things, and like the practices that you're utilizing. So transparency is important around accountability, because one, you have to demand that those entities are like are announcing or sharing exactly what they're going to do, right? So that at least puts that entity in a position of like, you said you were going to do this, and now like we have to hold you accountable. Accountability is also part of consequences, right? Like there should be consequences if you are not held accountable to what you said you're going to do. And those consequences often find themselves in the form of lawsuits. You have organizations like ACLU, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, so many, like even just you could use your own like civil suit, Attorney General's office, so many different entities where just straight up folks need to get sued if they're not holding themselves accountable. We've seen it in our Minneapolis public school systems. We've seen it in St. Paul public school systems. We've seen it from the state level and even from the national or federal Supreme Court level, to where if our laws and our governments are not holding up their part of what they said they're going to do, then that's when consequences come in and lawsuits are issued.
Very powerful, very powerful. So I just turned my camera on to close us out, and I want to offer to you ode of gratitude on behalf of, I don't like this term, so I'm gonna correct as soon as I say it, but on behalf of Generation Z, which I like to say are post-millennials. Just in case nobody tells you, I just want you to know that we are very grateful that you have chosen to step in as a buffer in the intergenerational leadership gaps that we are witnessing. So thank
Absolutely.
you. And with
Absolutely.
that, if you want any lasting shout outs for the Run Like Harriet, if you want to put up your screen on how on that last steps on how to get in contact, or your Facebook loop, just to end us out. And again, thank you. This is how you get involved. This is how you start the social systemic revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like ashe, ashe, ashe. That's all I can say. This is just a part of the marathon. So I hope this information was very useful. I hope that it, ignites the change from within. And I hope it, allows people to not be stuck in their pain, but to recognize their power and utilize that. We all are here for a reason, and if we all who believe in freedom cannot rest, then we need to make sure that we are walking forward, pushing forward, and being about the change that we want to see. So definitely appreciate that.
Thank you. And for those of you who have registered, you'll receive a strategic care package and summarizations of this presentation in your email that you use to register below. And if you are looking for to join in on any of the next power mapping sessions, the link will be posted below. Thank you. And with that, I close and thanks.
Yep. Peace.